Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Thursday, November 7th, 2024. This is The Excerpt. Today, Harris has conceded. Plus, we take an early look at the next Trump White House and who are some of the billionaires and business leaders who could influence the next 4 years. Vice President Kamala Harris officially called President-elect Donald Trump yesterday to congratulate him on his historic win. Not since the late 1800s has a candidate succeeded in returning to the White House after initially losing a second term. Later in the day, Harris delivered her concession speech in front of a crowd at Howard University, her alma mater, where just half a day earlier she had hoped to declare victory.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright.
So what's next? I caught up with USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page to take an early look at the next Trump White House, what the future holds for Democrats, and more. Susan, Election Day is in the rearview mirror. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, you bet. Great to be with you. What a night.
Yeah, what a night, Susan. And it really does beg the question of what's next. That's the crux of this piece that you wrote. Let's start by getting into what another Trump White House might look like. You know, what are some of the expectations for his first moves in office early next year?
The first is just considering what a strong position he's going to be in. He's won the White House. He's won not just the Electoral College, but also the popular vote. He has strengthened Republican hold on the Senate. We're still waiting for final word on the House, but Republicans are very optimistic about that. So he goes into the White House able to get some things done. And we expect him to do the things he said he was going to do. Tariffs on imports, deportations of undocumented migrants, rolling back federal regulations on energy and the environment, extending those big tax cuts that were passed in his first term, and America First foreign policy that might imperil some of the U.S. aid that's been going to Ukraine in its war against Russia. He's going to be able to go to Congress to get things done, and he's going to be able to sign executive orders.
And Susan, who really might be some of his biggest allies or people in his circle over the next 4 years?
This is going to be different from his first term. You remember early on in his first term, he had some people around him who were Republican establishment types who urged him to be cautious and to pay attention to convention. We don't think he'll do that this time. He knows more about how things work. He is more confident that he does that. He says he's going to have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. working on healthcare policy. And Elon Musk, the world's richest man, has turned out to be a close advisor, a big backer of Donald Trump. He's going to have some influence as well.
Wow. So do we have any sense, Susan, on whether or how this changes his legal strategy as he continues to face a slew of cases there?
It overhauls his legal problems. He has made it clear that he will end the federal prosecutions into charges that he tried to overturn the last election or that he mishandled some of the nation's most sensitive documents. He also says he will pardon those who have been convicted for their part in the January 6th insurrection. And finally, he's vowed to seek retribution against his political foes. We'll see exactly what that means.
All right. Another interesting part of this piece that you wrote about, Susan, was how Trump and his win here might really reshape the Democratic Party. How so, and really where do Dems go from here?
This is remarkable. Donald Trump already had reshaped the Republican Party. It's more populist, it's more male, it's more working class than it used to be. But with this election, he's reshaped the Democratic Party, too. He has managed to win a majority of Latino men. No Republican has done that before. He's gotten about 1 in 5 of the votes of Black men. That is a significant erosion in what has been the most loyal group that Democrats have. He has now swept the blue wall. The blue wall is blue no more. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, they all went to Trump. So Democrats will now face the task of figuring out why they did so badly and what they're going to go do themselves ahead.
There's another election in 2 years, Susan, the midterms. What significance will those hold, and what's next as we march toward them?
So this may be cold comfort to Democrats today, but the fact is we will have another election in 2 years. And historically, midterm elections have been tough for the party in power. In the past 5 midterm elections, the president's party has lost an average of 31 House seats, which, of course, would change power there.
All right. Susan Page is USA Today's Washington Bureau Chief joining us on this election week. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
So how did Donald Trump pull this off? The defeated president in 2020 and a convicted felon in 2024 reclaimed the White House with a one-of-a-kind campaign that relied on a new kind of turnout operation that hinged on a familiar issue, the economy. His turnout produced enough young men overall, Hispanic voters, and black men to beat Vice President Kamala Harris in key battleground states, including Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. In an election similar to Trump's 2016 victory over former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the outcome this year also turned on immigration and the economy, particularly the high inflation rates of recent years under the Biden administration. The job of getting new Trump voters to actually vote belonged to a turnout operation that drew questions throughout the Republicans' presidential campaign. The Trump team outsourced much of its canvassing and door-knocking to private organizations. It also targeted what officials called low-propensity voters, people who don't often get to the polls, as opposed to swing voters who could have gone for either major party candidate. And it worked. Exit polls showed that Trump increased his totals with a number of groups, particularly Hispanics, young men, and black men. The campaign adopted strategies designed to attract different kinds of voters. Trump and his aides said the effort to appeal to young men is the reason he did Joe Rogan's popular podcast. Trump also campaigned in a number of urban areas with people of color. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. Who are the billionaires and business leaders who might shape a second Trump presidency? I spoke with USA Today personal finance reporter Daniel Devisay for more. Daniel, thank you for making some time here after Election Day.
Yeah, it's been a busy 48 hours, hasn't it?
Yeah, yes, it has, Daniel. So, let's start with Elon Musk. This was an interesting piece. Musk is the world's richest person. He's clearly cozied up to Trump, including a formal endorsement. What can we expect this relationship to look like going forward?
Yeah, well, Elon Musk very publicly sort of sided with Trump, partnered with him at the, in the closing months of the campaign, and I think pretty much ran his ground game, very, very much involved. In the Trump administration, I'm not sure that it's clear what exactly Elon Musk might do, but I can't imagine that he wouldn't have the president's ear. I don't know when's the last time there was such a high-profile pairing of a sort of president-elect and a sort of leader of industry. Makes you think of the days back when Ben Bradley at the Washington Post would be hanging out with President Kennedy, that sort of thing. But I guess it's a kind of a question mark. I think, though, Musk would probably push for things that might help the Silicon Valley and sort of, in his mind, help entrepreneurship.
We know Peter Thiel has long used his money to influence Republican politics. How might he be a player over the next few years, and what do we know in particular about his support of Vice President-elect J.D. Vance?
Peter's been up and down in his support for Trump and had a falling out with him, I think, last year, but he's a huge ally of the Vice President-elect. Of course, Peter Thiel made his fortune in PayPal and Facebook. He's a longtime Republican donor. He's a libertarian by his own description. And Vance worked for Thiel in Silicon Valley, and Thiel helped Vance win a seat in the Senate. So here, too, I haven't seen any specific prediction about what role he might play in the Trump administration, if any. But again, he's a big name. He's better known than most of the 12 names on this list of these people I wrote about. So if I were the Trump administration, he'd be somebody to put into some sort of a public role.
You also wrote about Linda McMahon. She was in Trump's cabinet during his first term. Daniel, remind us who she is. What role did she previously hold, and what might be next for her?
Yeah, she's been a busy person. She and her husband, Vince McMahon, built the World Wrestling Entertainment Empire. And I think Trump himself dabbled in that. Trump had this whole first career as a sort of television star. And Linda McMahon served Trump in his first term as head of the Small Business Administration. Not a lot of people might remember that. They sat basically together at the convention, and Linda McMahon co-leads the Trump transition team along with another Trump supporter named Howard Lutnick. And Politico, which did a great article on this, names her, Linda McMahon, as a potential pick for Commerce Secretary.
You mentioned Howard Lutnick, Daniel. He has had a lot of power in the kind of financial services world. What do we know about him and his potential role here?
Howard Lutnick is chairman and CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, which is a major financial services firm. He's a big Trump donor. He's co-chair of the transition team along with Linda McMahon. So I think expect to see his name again, moving forward. He's apparently close to Trump. Mr. Letnick once appeared on The Apprentice, Trump's big reality television showcase. And according to Politico, he is considered a potential candidate for Treasury Secretary.
All right, there's also Vivek Ramaswamy, who was once a presidential candidate in this same election. It seems like a world away, but it was the same election.
Yeah.
He's also a billionaire with a lot of influence. How has he approached Trump since dropping out of the race, Daniel? And might he want to kind of orbit this president in the coming years himself?
Well, this is a common story where you have somebody who was running against the guy who won and said critical stuff about him. That happens on both sides of the aisle, right? But now Vivek Ramaswamy is supportive of Trump. I believe he spoke at that big Madison Square Garden rally. He is a biotech billionaire. He was once considered as a potential pick for VP. And though he wasn't picked as VP, he himself has hinted at possible roles he might play in a Trump White House, maybe overseeing immigration as Secretary of Homeland Security. The significance there is that Ramaswamy is from Ohio and is the son of Indian immigrants himself.
Interesting stuff. Folks can find Daniel's full piece with a link in today's show notes. Daniel Devisay covers personal finance for USA Today. An interesting next 4 years, Daniel. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, sir.
Stocks rallied to close at record highs yesterday following Trump's election win. The Dow Industrials, S&P 500, and NASDAQ Composite each ended at record levels. Investors likely are expecting lower taxes and deregulation, though fresh tariffs could bring challenges in the form of a higher deficit and inflation. The Republicans' win sent U.S. Treasury yields up sharply. Bitcoin hit a record high, and the dollar was on track for its biggest one-day percentage gain since September of 2022. Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith is discussing ways to wind down the 2 federal criminal cases against Trump before he takes office, according to a department official familiar with the matter. Continuing to pursue the charges against the former president would violate long-standing policy against prosecuting a sitting president. Because of 2 looming deadlines for documents to be filed in the federal cases, the department's decision about how to withdraw the charges could come within weeks. Trump spokesperson Stephen Chung said the decision came after Trump was elected with an overwhelming mandate to unify the country. Before the Justice Department discussions were revealed, Trump had suggested he could fire Smith or pardon himself. He has also vowed to prosecute his rivals. Trump has shared social media posts calling for the imprisonment of President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and Representative Nancy Pelosi, among other high-profile Democrats, for unspecified crimes. When he was in office, he asked an aide to have the Justice Department prosecute Hillary Clinton and former FBI Director James Comey. Is Google simply too big? The Department of Justice is accusing the tech giant of maintaining an illegal monopoly in its search and advertising sectors. If Google is dismantled, how might that impact the way Americans access information? Florian Ederer, a professor at Boston University's Questrom School of Business, joins my co-host Dana Taylor to discuss what happens next in the DOJ's case that could lead to a historic breakup. You can find that episode this afternoon beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on The Excerpt. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.